It is before dawn on August 15th, 1943. The fog is total. Grey, featureless, so thick the man in front of you disappears at arm's length. Somewhere ahead, through the chop and the cold and the wind off the North Pacific, is a beach. The soldiers in the rubber assault boats cannot see it yet. They can hear it, the grind of gravel, the break of small surf. They paddle toward it with weapons ready, because they are about to invade an island held by 5,000 Japanese soldiers who have had 14 months to turn it into a killing ground. They reach the beach. They spread out. They move inland, crouching in the fog. And then they hear it. Not gunfire, not the crump of artillery or the crack of a sniper's rifle. Barking. The first living things the Allied soldiers encounter on Kiska Island are dogs. 34,000 men, 3 battleships, the largest amphibious force ever assembled in the North Pacific. What they find on Kiska is tundra, fog, cold wind, and dogs. The question is not what happened to the Japanese garrison. History already knows what happened. The question is how. How 5,000 men vanish from a fortified island, from a harbor under blockade, without a single Allied sailor seeing them go. And beneath that, who made it happen, and what it cost. The island itself is a place that discourages visitors. Kiska is roughly 30 miles long and 7 miles wide, a volcanic slab near the western end of the Aleutian chain, approximately 1,450 miles from Anchorage. Its lower reaches are covered in tundra. Its upper reaches give way to bare rock. A volcanic cone, 4,000 feet, dormant for now, dominates the northern end. There are no trees. What Kiska does have on its eastern side is one of the finest natural harbors in the region. That harbor is the only reason anyone ever came here. The Aleutian weather does the rest. Winds exceeding 100 miles per hour. Fog so persistent it swallows aircraft within seconds of their breaking from the clouds. 250 rainy days a year. Summer temperatures that rarely exceed 60 degrees. This is not hostile terrain. It is indifferent terrain, the kind of place that kills through sheer accumulation. Cold, damp, and the slow erosion of everything a man needs to remain effective. The island's most powerful defender in the end was never Japan. It was this. Japan's arrival in the Aleutians traces back to a single afternoon in April 1942. On the 18th, 16 B-25 Mitchell bombers launched from the USS Hornet and struck Tokyo, Nagoya, Osaka. The Doolittle raid inflicted minimal physical damage and enormous psychological damage, not to the Japanese population, but to the Japanese military command, which had promised the homeland was inviolable. The question that followed immediately: where did the planes come from? Japanese planners concluded wrongly that the raid had launched either from Midway or from the Aleutians. Their response was to take both. Deny the Americans a staging point in the Central Pacific. Block the northern approach. Prevent a junction of American and Soviet forces. Establish bases from which to threaten the West Coast. The logic was coherent. Japan in June of 1942 is still ascending. The plan feels like strength. What Japan does not know is that Admiral Chester Nimitz already knows they are coming. By May 1942, American cryptanalysts have broken the Japanese naval codes. Not partially, not speculatively, but specifically. Nimitz knows the composition of the invasion fleet. He knows the timing, he knows the plan. He has no forces sufficient to stop them. He knows that too. June 7th, 1942. 1 o'clock in the morning. Kiska's only inhabitants are 10 men from a United States Navy weather detachment and a dog named Explosion. 550 Japanese naval marines come ashore in the dark. The operation takes hours, not days. By the time the sun is up, or would be, if the clouds permitted, the harbor belongs to Japan. 2 Americans are killed. 8 are captured and sent to Japan as prisoners of war. 1 man runs. Senior Petty Officer William C. House disappears into the tundra and finds a cave. He stays there for 50 days. He eats plants. He eats earthworms. His weight drops to 80 pounds. He watches the harbor from the hills and knows, with a certainty that accumulates day by day, that no one is coming. America's entire military presence on this island. 1 man, a cave, and dwindling options. On the 51st day, more or less, he walks out and surrenders. It is not a heroic last stand. It is 1 man doing the math. The dog is easier. Explosion is taken in by the Japanese garrison. Fed. Cared for. She has no allegiances beyond the people who feed her, and in this the Japanese oblige. She is, at this moment, the most comfortable American on the island. 2,000 more Japanese troops land behind the first wave. The garrison flag goes up over Kiska Harbor, American soil, the first time since the War of 1812. Over the next 14 months, the Japanese make Kiska into a fortress. They build a submarine base and a seaplane base on the harbor's northwestern shore. They emplace coastal gun batteries with overlapping fields of fire, calibrated to deny any assault on the harbor approaches. They layer anti-aircraft guns at multiple altitudes. They build dummy defenses across the island to confuse aerial reconnaissance. The barracks are dug into the tundra sod, revetted, sandbagged, invisible from above. Among the coastal gun batteries are heavy weapons originally prepared for the Japanese occupation of Midway. The island Japan never took. The guns built for a base that was never established end up in the mud of an island no one will ever use. And the bombing begins. American aircraft are flying 1,200-mile round trips from Umnak airfield through weather that makes the flight itself a significant undertaking. Day after day, in fog and cloud and sideways rain, they come. Ships go down in the harbor with regularity. Japanese destroyers, supply vessels, submarines. The masts of wrecked ships collect in the shallows of Kiska Harbor like a catalogue of the occupation's losses. The garrison lives underground, under constant assault, in cold that doesn't relent and damp that finds every gap in every uniform. They cannot build the airfield they came to build. The conditions make it nearly impossible. They will leave Kiska 14 months later, and the runway will still be unfinished. In March of 1943, the last realistic hope of holding the island dies at the Battle of the Komandorsky Islands. Vice Admiral Boshiro Hosogaya commands a Japanese surface force that outnumbers and outguns the American ships blocking the supply route. He has them. He turns back anyway. From an American force that had exhausted nearly all of its ammunition and was in no position to press the fight. Hosogaya is relieved of command on March 31st. The surface resupply route closes. Submarines only, now. The Vice tightens. May 1943, Attu, 16,000 Americans against 2,650 Japanese on an island 60 miles west of Kiska. 19 days of combat in terrain almost identical to this one, tundra, mud, fog, ridgelines. 3,800 Allied casualties. 29 Japanese soldiers taken alive out of an entire garrison. The rest fight until they cannot. On the morning of May 29th, 800 Japanese soldiers stage a final mass charge into American lines. Before they go, they kill their own wounded, nearly 500 men, rather than leave them to be captured. The charge breaks through 2 lines before it runs out of men. 29 survivors out of 2,650. Every American commander in the Pacific carries this knowledge. They have earned it in blood. When they look at Kiska, they see Attu. They see what Japanese soldiers do when cornered. They see a garrison of 5,000 men who will have to be killed, one position at a time, across 14 months of prepared defenses. They are right about what they know. They are wrong about what it means. Because Attu changes 2 things, not 1. It makes Allied commanders assume the worst is coming on Kiska, and it makes Japanese commanders, quietly, rationally, decide they want no part of repeating it. On May 21st, 1943, 8 days before the last charge on Attu, Imperial General Headquarters authorizes Operation KE. The Kiska garrison will be evacuated. The question is how. The question is who. Rear Admiral Masatomi Kimura is not the obvious choice for anything. He was born in 1891 in Shizuoka, adopted by a family in Tottori, and graduated from the Imperial Japanese Navy Academy, 107th out of 118 cadets. In a navy that kept careful track of such things, this was not a distinction. What he was known for was his mustache. Heavy, full, Kaiser style, conspicuous in a service where such things were uncommon. His career had been spent largely on destroyers, steady work, but not the kind that brought notice. In March of 1943, he is escorting a convoy. 8 transports, 6,000 soldiers of the 51st Division bound from Rabaul to Leh. What happens in the Bismarck Sea is swift and total. American and Australian bombers arrive in waves and do not stop until everything is sunk. All 8 transports go down. 4 destroyers go down, including Kimura's flagship, Shirayuki. He is pulled from the water with a bullet in his shoulder and a bullet in his stomach. He recovers. He's assigned to the Kiska evacuation. When he is briefed on the mission, the island, the garrison, the Allied blockade, the timeline, his private assessment is that his chances are slim, if not nil. He does not say this publicly. He begins planning. The first problem is the blockade. American surface ships hold a cordon around Kiska that submarines have been trying to pierce since May. 12 successful runs, 820 men evacuated. Then 3 submarines are lost, and the effort is abandoned. More than 4,300 men remain on the island. The second problem is communication. The evacuation fleet cannot use radio, not since April 1943, when American fighters, guided by intelligence the Japanese now suspect correctly, was derived from their own broken codes, ambushed and killed Admiral Yamamoto's transport over Bougainville. Since then, the Imperial Navy operates on the assumption that the Americans may be reading their signals. Kimura's fleet will maintain complete radio silence throughout the operation, regardless of inconvenience. The ambush of Yamamoto, America's most dramatic intelligence success of the Pacific War, has triggered the operational security that will make the Kiska evacuation invisible. The 2 events are connected by a thread the Americans cannot see. Through June, Kimura trains his fleet in Paramushiro Bay, 8-hour drills in fog, refueling in formation, navigating blind, launching and recovering landing craft, practicing every phase of an evacuation they cannot rehearse on the actual island. He is ably assisted by Captain Rokuji Arichika, his senior staff officer, a man who has been in the north since the original invasion in June 1942, and knows these waters the way a sailor knows the weight of familiar rope. They drill until the officers know it without thinking. On Kiska, the garrison assembles every night at the harbor, summoned before midnight, marching 5 miles over tundra in the dark, standing at the water's edge in case the ships come, then marching back before dawn because the ships haven't come. Some men make this walk 8 times. They do not know when Kimura is coming. They simply assemble and wait and walk back and try again. July 25th. A PBY Catalina flying boat makes radar contact on what appears to be Japanese ships operating southwest of Attu. The American blockade force, battleships, cruisers, destroyers, break station and steams to intercept. On July 26th, they open fire on the contacts. The contacts do not return fire. They do not maneuver. They do not exist. The Battle of the Pips, named for the radar returns that bloom on the screens and then dissolve, lasts for hours and accomplishes nothing. 5 American ships collide with one another in the dark. An escort vessel and a destroyer are too badly damaged to continue. Ammunition is expended on empty ocean. When it is over, the blockade force is sent 105 miles southeast of its normal station to refuel. The window into Kiska Harbor is open. On July 27th, Kimura's fleet steams through the zone where the Americans fought their phantom enemy the day before. Had the blockade force preserved its ammunition and stayed on station, it would have met him here. It is not on station, it is not here. Kimura keeps moving. July 28th. Kimura makes his decision at the final refueling point, 500 miles southwest of Kiska. There is no storm on the horizon. There may not be one. The fog will have to do. He orders the fleet forward. The approach is in near total whiteout. The garrison on the island has spent weeks monitoring the blockade with a captured British radar set. The first the Imperial Navy ever acquired, taken from a sunken British battleship, finding gaps in the cordon that the Battle of the Pips has already torn wide open. Kimura's ships thread it in fog so thick the officers on the bridges can barely see their own bows. At 3:30 in the Papua Sea. Afternoon on July 29th, the fleet drops anchor in Kiska Harbor. Almost immediately, one of the destroyers mistakes a headland, Little Kiska Head, for an American vessel in the fog and fires 2 torpedoes. One strikes the headland. The other runs into the harbor and detonates against the cliff east of the submarine base. The garrison, already assembled on the beaches and ready to board, dives for cover. For a moment, the evacuation nearly becomes its own catastrophe. Then, silence. The ships are real. The ships are here. The men had been summoned 6 hours early. Food, weapons, extra clothing, abandoned where they sat. Men stream in from every point on the island, from anti-aircraft positions and coastal batteries and the half-finished airfield, all converging on the harbor. 18 landing craft run shuttles between the beach and the ships, back and forth in the fog. 3,100 Navy personnel. 3,000 Army, 5,183 men in total. At a signal, a pre-arranged explosion marking the destruction of the radar installation, the operation pauses. The ships go quiet. The men aboard pray. For the 2,638 dead at Atu. For the 2,500 men who died on and around Kiska during 14 months of occupation. The prayer ends. The engines restart. 55 minutes after the first landing craft touched the beach, the fleet rounds the northern tip of the island and steams for Paramushiro. No one is left behind. No one is lost. The guns have been disabled, their critical components removed and destroyed. The shore installations are wired, set to detonate 8 to 12 hours after departure. Explosion and the other dogs are left on the beaches. The fleet vanishes into the fog. The island, from this moment, is empty. Allied aircraft and ships continue bombing it for 18 days. August 4th, 1943. 300 tons of bombs fall on Kiska, on fog, tundra, and abandoned gun emplacements. The anti-aircraft guns that had filled every Allied bombing run for 14 months have been silent since July 28th. Radio signals from the island have been silent since July 28th. Aerial reconnaissance analysts note that bomb damage goes unrepaired. American pilots, growing suspicious, land on the bombed-out runway and look around. The signs are there. They are not ambiguous, and Allied commanders refuse to accept them. This is not stupidity. That is the point. Every commanding officer in this theater has built his understanding of the enemy from direct experience. From Guadalcanal, from Atu, from 2 years of Pacific War in which Japanese soldiers have demonstrated again and again that they do not retreat, they do not surrender, they die in place. This is not a prejudice. It is an accurate characterization of every island engagement the Pacific War has produced. Every island engagement except Kiska. Allied commanders look at the silence, the empty skies, the unrepaired craters, and conclude that the Japanese are conserving ammunition, digging deeper, preparing for the assault. Their entire professional education tells them this is what a garrison does. They cannot see the exception because they have learned the rule too well. The invasion force assembles, 34,000 men. The U.S. 7th Infantry Division, the 13th Canadian Infantry Brigade, the 87th Mountain Infantry Regiment, and the 1st Special Service Force, an elite joint American-Canadian unit making its first combat deployment. 3 battleships, Pennsylvania, Idaho, Tennessee. Cruisers, 19 destroyers. The expected Canadian casualty rate alone, 1,800 men. On August 15th, the fleet arrives off Kiska in weather that could have been lifted from any other day in the island's history. Dense fog, high winds, cold, heavy rain. Soldiers climb into rubber assault boats and paddle 2 miles through the dark toward a shore they cannot see. The fleet has been bombarding Japanese positions for days. The Japanese positions are empty. The 13th Infantry Brigade War Diary, written by a soldier who is living it, captures the morning directly. We are lost in dense fog. Can this be D-Day? It can. It is. 2 forces land on separate beaches in fog so thick that visibility collapses to a few yards. They encounter each other, each force, separated from its own units, moving through an island they have never seen, takes the shapes materializing ahead of them as potentially Japanese. The shooting starts. 28 Americans and 4 Canadians are killed. 50 more are wounded. None of them by the enemy, because there is no enemy. There is only fog and the accumulated weight of everything they have been trained to expect. Then the timed explosives the Japanese left behind begin going off. Shore installations detonating in the dark, on schedule, precisely as the garrison planned before they boarded their ships 3 weeks ago. Men who have just survived the friendly fire now crouch on muddy hillsides and listen to explosions they cannot locate or explain. Booby traps, mines, vehicle accidents on terrain that was never designed for vehicles. On the 17th, the destroyer USS Abner Red strikes a drifting Japanese mine on anti-submarine patrol. The explosion severs 67 feet of her stern. 71 sailors are killed. The island is empty. The casualties are real. August 16th. Patrols converging on the main Japanese camp at Kiska Harbor confirm what the aerial photographs have been trying to say for weeks. No enemy troops, no garrison, nothing. The coded signal goes back to the 2nd Regiment waiting on Amchitka. Baby needs a new pair of shoes. For the men waiting on the airfield, that means they will not be going. And on the beach, barking. Among everything left behind on Kiska Island, among the disabled guns and the sunken midget submarines and the 3 ships rusting in the shallows of the harbor, among the abandoned equipment and the half-finished airfield, there are dogs. And among the dogs is Explosion, alive, fed. Greeting the soldiers who have just invaded the island she has inhabited since June of 1942, when the American sailors who owned her were captured and shipped to Japan, and she was left to the mercy of a Japanese garrison that fed her for 14 months, and then, when the time came to leave, left her here. She is the only living witness to everything that happened on this island. She does not testify. The aftermath arrives in pieces. Admiral Ernest King reports to Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox that the only things remaining on the island are dogs and freshly brewed coffee. Knox asks for an explanation. King, according to accounts that are almost certainly apocryphal, responds, "The Japanese are very clever. Their dogs can brew coffee." General Simon Buckner. To attract maximum attention, it's hard to find anything more effective than a great big, juicy, expensive mistake. Total Allied casualties in Operation Cottage, 313. All non-combat, on an island with no enemy. Japanese casualties during the evacuation, 0. In the years after the war, some American analysts concluded that Kiska had taught them something, that Japan would withdraw when the odds became sufficiently overwhelming. It seemed like a lesson, a refinement of the mental model. Every subsequent Pacific Island assault confirmed it was not. Iwo Jima, Okinawa. The exception Kiska represented was not repeated. It was not a window into a changing enemy. It was the one time one patient admiral found a gap in a blockade and moved before anyone knew he was moving, and the gap closed behind him, and the rule resumed as if the exception had never occurred. Masatomi Kimura received no particular recognition for what he had done. He was assigned new missions. He fought at Surigao Strait. He led a cruiser-destroyer raid on American positions at Mindoro in December of 1944. He was promoted to vice admiral on the day Japan surrendered, November 1st, 1945, and entered the reserves 9 days later. After the war, he worked in the salt industry. He died of stomach cancer in 1960. He was 68 years old. He had placed 107th out of 118 cadets at the Naval Academy. He had been better known in the Imperial Navy for his mustache than for his record. He had privately assessed his chances on the Kiska mission as slim, if not nil. He had loaded 5,183 men onto ships in 55 minutes in fog, so thick his own sailors fired torpedoes at a headland, and he had brought every one of them home. The island today requires authorization to visit. Its central portion, where everything in this story took place, was designated a National Historic Landmark in 1985. It is part of the Aleutian Islands World War II National Monument. No one lives there. Unexploded ordnance is scattered across the tundra. Rounds fired at an island that had already emptied, mines that drifted past the war that planted them, the residue of a battle fought entirely against an absence. The harbor is empty. The hills are the same tundra-covered hills they have always been. The volcano at the northern end stands in whatever weather is happening that day, which is usually fog. Kimura never came back. The island kept nothing of him. The island, for its part, kept nothing of anyone, not the garrison that held it for 14 months, not the bombers that pounded it, not the 34,000 men who landed on it to find dogs and silence and the slow tick of timed explosives counting down in the dark. It was always just this: fog, rock, grey water, and the harbor. Everything else passed through,